has recently been announced that the production company Legendary is now in the final stages of closing a deal to revive the classic science fiction universe of Buck Rogers. It's rumored that their intent is to launch a new franchise for our modern era. In this video, I'd like to break down what we know so far about this news, as well as some of the history behind this beloved property. The popularity of Buck Rogers resulted in one of the first multimedia sci-fi franchises. The character has appeared in comic strips, comic books, radio programs, movies, and television shows, and went on to inspire many other iconic pop culture properties. The character, first known as Anthony Rogers, initially appeared in a 1928 issue of Amazing Stories in a novella entitled Armageddon 2419 AD, written by Philip Francis Nolan. Rogers, a coal mine inspector, becomes trapped during a cave-in while investigating strange phenomena in abandoned mines. Exposed to a radioactive gas, he falls into a state of suspended animation. He is perfectly preserved when he wakes up almost 500 years later in the 25th century, finding himself caught in the middle of a planetary war. The character's adventures continued in subsequent sequel stories that were later adapted as a recurring comic strip in 1929, where the protagonist first became known as Buck Rogers and featured his adventures into outer space. The popularity of Buck Rogers grew exponentially across the country as it was printed in more and more newspapers, and accumulated an international fan base as the adventure comic became translated in 18 languages and came to appear in as many as 160 international newspapers. In 1932, his origin story and subsequent adventures in the distant future was adapted as a radio series and had the distinction of being the first science fiction program to hit the airwaves. Buck Rogers continued to be featured in other forms of media throughout the years. In 1939, a 12-part film series was produced, with Buster Crabbe playing the lead role. In 1950, the first television series aired in black and white. Through different forms of media, the origin story of Buck Rogers continued to be revamped and presented to a new audience. In 1979, a new film was released that performed well, and so NBC gave the green light to develop a full series. The story centered around Captain William Buck Rogers, played by Gil Gerard, a U.S. Air Force and NASA pilot who commanded a shuttle launched in the year 1987. His ship encountered a spatial phenomena that left his shuttle damaged and Rogers frozen, drifting in space for 500 years until he was revived. Aaron Gray also co-starred as starfighter pilot Colonel Wilma Deering, and the show also featured a robot sidekick and a talking computer. Though the series was short-lived, only lasting 2 seasons, the Buck Rogers franchise maintained its popularity with the public. Toys, video games, and novels continued to be produced throughout the years, and Buck Rogers became an important fixture in pop culture, introducing the masses to the concept of space exploration in the format of a swashbuckling adventure. It paved the way for similar science fiction space operas like Flash Gordon, Battlestar Galactica, and Star Wars. The beloved cartoon spoof Duck Dodgers in the 24th and a half century, featuring Daffy Duck and other popular Looney Tunes characters, eventually turned into a series in the early 2000s. The themes and characters from Buck Rogers also heavily influenced the popular long-running animated series Futurama. It seems throughout the decades that the IP has continued to introduce itself to new generations of science fiction fans in a number of different ways. Even those who aren't familiar with it more than likely have heard the name referenced by NASA or in other popular movies and shows, or they've enjoyed other creations that were inspired by it. And now a fresh attempt is being made to breathe new life into this property and to introduce it to a new generation. Producer Don Murphy back in 2015 at San Diego Comic-Con announced his intentions to make a film based on the original Philip Nolan story Armageddon 2419 AD. Murphy declared it was his dream project to make a film based on the original 1928 novella, since it had recently entered into the public domain. However, there were many legal complications surrounding this property regarding copyrights and trademarks and how they apply to fictional characters. And though the original story had entered into the public domain, the fact that the protagonist wasn't known as Buck Rogers yet further complicated matters, since the name itself is trademarked and has continued to be in use since 1929. According to a recent article from The Hollywood Reporter in October of 2020, There are reports that after a lengthy legal battle over the rights to the franchise, negotiations are now in the final stages or possibly have already been completed, paving the way for development of a new Buck Rogers project. Mary Parent and Cale Boiter are overseeing the project for Legendary, the production company behind the new Dune adaptation, Godzilla, and Kong Skull Island. In a partnership with Don Murphy and his wife Susan Montford and their company Angry Films, they've worked to secure the screen rights. Murphy and Montford's past credits include producing Transformers, Shoot 'Em Up, and Real Steel. And the rumor is that Legendary's plans involve much more than a film reboot. Sources also report that they are envisioning and looking to create a new Buck Rogers multimedia franchise. Along with a big screen take on the space opera, it is reported that there will also be a new prestige television series, as well as an anime series, with the intention for these multiple platforms to give audiences a 360-degree look at heroic set in the 25th century. With negotiations close to completion, I'm looking forward to hearing updates regarding writing staff and casting choices. There has certainly been a surge recently of older sci-fi and fantasy properties being revived for new audiences, either in the form of reboots or sequels, or a combination of both. In the past, these attempts have had mixed results with fans. The best outcomes, it appears, have been from studios and creators who are committed to honoring the legacy of the original IP while making it appealing for new audiences. I hope this is the case with this new franchise. As mentioned previously, one of the production companies that is working to secure the rights for this IP has also recently been involved in other modern adaptations of old properties, such as Denis Villeneuve's Dune. With what we've been able to see so far from that film, it is said to be perhaps the most faithful live-action adaptation of the source material yet. The jury is still out on that claim, but it appears that the studio that will be handling Buck Rogers has a better reputation than some others when it comes to adapting well-known classic properties. With that in mind, I remain cautiously optimistic, of course, but I am excited for this icon of science fiction to be introduced to a new generation, including mine. While I wasn't around when the character first burst onto the scene, the legacy of this universe has influenced so many other properties throughout the years, and I look forward to finding a renewed appreciation for the one that started it all. Though the battle for the rights to the franchise is coming to a close, there is still a long way to go for production to start. I'll be sure to keep you up to date with any news and developments regarding this new attempt to revisit the Buck Rogers universe. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like if you did, and be sure to subscribe for more sci-fi and fantasy content. And let me know what you think of this new development for a Buck Rogers franchise. Do you have any suggestions for who could possibly be cast as Buck Rogers himself? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you all so much for your support, and as always, have a very nerdy day.